So, so how are you all?
We are fine.
Okay.
Okay. I hope you all doing good. Right. So, hope you have both the lecture notes which I sent last week as well as which I sent on this Sunday. Right. So, the lecture note which I sent you last week, we actually discussed it, and it has at the in the end of that lecture note, it has some we discussed up to the differences between early Vedic religion and Upanishadic religion, right? So, and also we discussed a bit about the concepts about the Upanishadic religion. And apart from that, within the latter part of the lecture note, you could say I have given some stanzas and their meanings, right? So I'm not going to discuss those within the class because those are some extra readings for you, right? So those does not contain so they do not contain much important information. Rather, you could go through them and get a kind of idea about those stanzas and their meanings, right? So during our last session, we finished discussing about the the differences between the early Vedic religion and Upanishadic religion, right? So, and you all did the answers and I gave the feedback. You all done that very well. And Miss Sairi-san wasn't there for the last session. So I will send you the question which I gave you to students last week. So go through the lecture note and try to answer that question in an essay, as an essay form, right? So the question is to discuss the differences between early Vedic religion and Upanishadic age, right? So I will send that question to your email. And now we are in bachelor's, right? So this is not like your diploma course. So you have to be a bit more professional and advanced when you are writing the answers, right? So even though I have presented here the differences within a table, whenever you write answers for an essay question, you have to describe it. And you have to use your own words, right? So you don't have to use the numerical methods like numbering. You don't have to do that. Rather, you have to write the answers in an essay way, and you have to describe it in your own words, right? So go through the lecture note, and I will send you the question by tonight, and try to answer it. And I'm planning to give you a marking for your answer, right? So that's it. And before we are moving to the lecture, so the latter part of the lecture, or the last week lecture note, I'm not, as I told you earlier, I'm not going to discuss it within the class because it has some extra readings for you. And I'm going to go through the main points which we discussed at the end of the last session, only the basic concepts, right? Then after that, I'm planning to move to the today's lecture note, which I sent you on this Sunday, right? So where I'm planning to discuss the principles of the Upanishads, right? So when we talk about the principles of Upanishads, there are within the Upanishad, we could find 13 main principles, and bit confused, actually not confusing, and easy to understand, but it's very difficult to grasp and remember everything at one day. So what I'm going to do is I'm planning to discuss seven principles tonight, and the rest of the other 6 principles I'm planning to discuss on next session, right? So then it will be easy for you to realize and grasp those principles. And the other reason why I'm planning to do the 7 principles, I'm having a dry cough. It's very difficult for me to talk for longer hours. So due to that reason also, I'm planning to discuss only 7 principles tonight, right? And also one thing to note, that if I get a call, it's difficult for me to speak for longer times. So if I get a cough, excuse me for like 2 to 3 minutes. I will drink some water and come back, right? So I'm sorry for if any inconvenience held during the class, right? So I will give you a brief introduction what we discussed so far. So we were in the Upanishadic part, and when we were discussing about the Vedic religion, we we learned about 4 great books, right? So the Vedic literature, that is the Vedic literature, right? So through that Vedic literature, the Vedic religion is composed, and through those great books, we could learn more about Vedic religion as well as the Vedic literature, right? So what are those 4 great books in the Vedic literature? Rig Veda,
Veda, yes, Veda.
Atharva Veda, right? So when we look at those great books, in each and every book is divided into 4 main parts, right? So if you take Rig Veda, it composed with 4 parts, right? Likewise, all 4 books are composed with 4 parts. So what are they? Samhitas, Brahmanas, Aranyakas, and Upanishads, right? So Samhitas and Brahmanas, they are identified as Karma Kanda, right? So those actually talks about this very temporal life, right? So Samhitas, they give a description about all the hymns which are included within the Vedic religion, and Brahmanas, it's like a guidebook, right? So hope you can remember, it's like a manual where it gives a detailed introduction about the how to perform several sacrificial ceremonies, and it's like a guidebook, right? So so due to the fact that they only talked about the very temporal life, they are categorized as karma kanda, right? So, and also we learned that due to they only talks about the physical or material gaining, right? So material gaining, due to that those 2 are further categorized as the lower knowledge, right? Lower knowledge. And the other 2 parts are the Aranyakas and Upanishads, right? So they talks about the spiritual life, or how the way to achieve liberating wisdom, right? So due to that fact, these 2 parts are categorized under Jnana Kanda, right? Jnana Kanda, and they also known as the higher knowledge, as they talks about they do not talks about within this very temporal life, rather than beyond that, right? Spiritual advancement, right? So due to that fact, they are categorized under Jnana Kanda, right? So those are the very main points that we discussed so far. And the Aranyakas is about all about forest treatises, and also we learned that Aranyakas pave the path to Upanishads, right? So, and Upanishad is the very highest point and the culmination point within the Vedic religion, highest goal of a person that could achieve according to the Vedic religion, right? So if we talk about I will go through the main concepts which we discussed during last session quickly. So if we talk about Upanishads, it's all about asceticism, right? So starts with Aranyakas, and they all about asceticism, right? So they renounce everything, their all the wealth and their loved ones, and the people who want to learn this higher knowledge, they gave up their everything and come to the forest, and they become isolated, and they want to learn the actual truth. They wanted to contemplate the actual truth about the self, right? So this is kind of basically, uh, due to these facts, we could identify the Upanishad is all about asceticism, right? Ascetic practices are there, and there is a strict sense of self-discipline and self-denial. Within that specific asceticism, we could see self-discipline as well as self-denial. And even though they came to forest in order to, they were the people who fed up with the sacrificial performances. They gave up the everything, and they wanted to search the truth behind those sacrificial ceremonies, those who came to the forest, right? So but at the beginning, they believed in sacrificial ceremonies. At the beginning they believed, but at the very end, they were fed up with those in vain sacrificial ceremonies, and they wanted to realize the hidden truth behind the sacrificial ceremonies, and they want to realize the self or Atman, right? That's why they came to the forest in order to contemplate or meditate, right? So so this disciplined meditation or disciplined contemplation, they believe that this kind of disciplined meditation or disciplined contemplation is the results of these meditations are equal to the physical sacrifices. They believe that these disciplined meditations or contemplations are would give equal results, same as the physical sacrifices, right? And further, they believe that the extreme ascetic practices would help them to escape from the continual reincarnation or this cycle of birth, right? So the extreme ascetic practices would help them to escape from the continual reincarnation, right? And also and they further talked about the individual soul, right? If we take the according to the Upanishadic teachings, if we take the whole world, if you take the whole world as a whole, each individual soul is a specific part within the world. Specific part is a constituent part of within the world, right? So, and they constantly want to, the main aim of those people or those individual is to seek freedom from their life in order to take the freedom, achieve the freedom from the wheel of life, right? So they want to achieve the escape from the, actually they want to escape from the specific reincarnation, right? So, and also they believe that the the whatever they do, the bad deeds and good deeds, whenever within our lives we do bad deeds and good deeds, right? So the life or whatever we receive within this specific life is not predetermined by a god. Now, whenever we talk about the early Vedic religion, people believe that everything is determined by a god, right? But when it comes to the Upanishadic age, they believe they came to know that those whatever we receive within this life are not predetermined by a god. No god could forgive or give us what we want. Rather, they believe that we receive good due to our good deeds, but whatever we did during our pre-lives, right? And if we get bad results or worse worse future life or worse results due to the evil deeds which were done by us during our previous lives, right? So good deeds leads to for what they believe was good deeds leads for better future life and evil deeds would lead for worse future life, right? So they came to identify and understand that is how the life was built based on the whatever the good deeds or bad deeds, right? So those are the main concepts that we discussed during last session, and I think I have given some stanzas and their meanings which are included within the Upanishads, right? So I'm not going to discuss all within the class tonight because they are not that important. I don't say that they are not important. Rather, there's nothing to teach. You could go through and get a kind of idea, right? So, and what I'm planning to do is, as I told you, I'm planning to turn into the principles of Upanishads. I will start discussing those principles from now, right? So now turn to, I think you all have the lecture note which I sent you on this Sunday, right? So now I'm going to discuss that. The summary of principle Upanishads, right? So if we when we take the Upanishads, it consists with 13 principles, right? So I have given those 13. We are going to learn the very basic summary of those principles, right? So they are very deep, and it's a very deep subject to learn, like a specific doctrine. So we are not going to learn the entire thing. It's actually impossible. Rather, I'm going to teach you a very basic summary of each and every principle, right? So the first one is Isha Upanishad, right? The first principle is Isha Upanishad, right? So Isha Upanishad is belongs to Yajurveda. Isha Upanishad is now these principles are belongs to several several Vedas, right? So Isha Upanishad, it belongs to Yajurveda. This and one of the smallest Upanishads, right? So Isha Upanishads belong to Yajurveda, and it is one of the smallest Upanishads, right? So it basically talks about the path of knowledge and path of action, right? So when we discuss these Isha Upanishad, two forms could be identified within this discussion, which is the Isha Upanishad, right? So the former part is talks about the Atman or soul in its transcendental form, and the latter part talks about the immanent form, right? This is the basic summary, right? So we are not going to learn everything. Rather, this is the basic summary. Now, I know this is a bit confusing for you, right? So what you could go do is once I taught these six now today I'm planning to discuss 7 Upanishad principles, right? So once I finish the class, what you could do is you don't have to remember everything, right? So rather for you to easily remember, what you could do is now the most important parts are the principle. What is the principle, right? So Isha Upanishad, and from where that principle came from, right? So if we take Isha Upanishad, it came from Yajurveda. Yajurveda, and it mainly discusses about the path of knowledge and path of action. And apart from that, two parts that we could identify within the whole section. The former part discusses about the Atman in its transcendent form, and the latter part discussed about the immanent form. Form, right? So, and also it discusses about the paradoxical nature of the self. And at the end of this Isha Upanishad, now we learned that even though Aranyakas and Upanishads, they they do not want to believe with about the sacrificial ceremonies. In a small content they practiced whenever they were in the forest in small amounts. Some guru means teachers and students practiced sacrificial ceremonies, but in a very small manner, right? So in within the Isha Upanishad also, they beg to the god of light. Who was the god of light? We could identify sun or Agni, right? God of fire, to help them to understand the path of knowledge and path of action. The two main concepts that are talking within the Isha Upanishad are path of knowledge and path of action, right? So within the end of the Isha Upanishad, they plead the god of light to for help them to understand the path of action and path of knowledge, right? So those are the main important points within the Isha Upanishad, right? So what you could do is, I know this now I have given a paragraph where it is a bit confusing, right? So what you could do is, you could prepare a table. I don't know whether you could see it or not. I will send you a photo of this so that you could go through. But if you want to do it by yourself, you could prepare. I don't know whether this is, you could see here the principle, and then from where it came from, and the
Discussion
about, you can see it.
Yes.
Right. So the first row is about principle, which principle and from where it came from, and discusses about the main points that it discusses about, and there are any other important facts, right? So if we take the Isha Upanishad, I will send you a photo of this, right? So with my handwritings, I'm not going to type it, so you could prepare any way that you want then, right? So the first principle is Isha Upanishad, right? So from where did it came?
Yajurveda.
Yajurveda, right? So it basically main points that it touches, major points such as path of knowledge and path of action. And apart from that, if we take this dissertation or the discussion of Isha Upanishad principle, we could find two forms, right? The former part discusses about the Atman in its transcendent form, and the latter part discusses about the immanent form, right? And also, apart from that, it further discusses about the paradoxical nature of the self. And at the end, they plead to the god of light for help them to understand the path of knowledge and path of action, right? So those are the main points that you have to remember about the Isha Upanishad, right? So I will send you the summary which I prepared you, right? So you could re-prepare it accordingly, which you prefer, right? So the second Upanishad, the principle is Kena Upanishad. Kena, or which way, anyway you could pronounce that, Kena Upanishad, right? So Kena Upanishad belongs to Samaveda. Kena Upanishad belongs to Samaveda, right? So Kena, if you take the meaning of this term, Kena means by whom. By whom? If you take the meaning, by whom, right? Now let's look at the important points that Kena Upanishad discusses about, right? So Kena Upanishad discusses about the real power behind the functions of phenomenal universe and the workings of the man. Real power behind the functions of the phenomenal universe and the workings of the man, right? And apart from that, it asks the questions about who is the Atman, who the Atman is. Within the discussion or within the dissertation of Kena Upanishad, it asks question which is the who is Atman, and within the same discussion, they have provided the answer for that. answer for the who is the Atman. Question is who is the Atman, and within the same principle, within the Kata Upanishad, it has given the answer for that. Right, so those are the main points. I have given some extra points as well, but mainly you have to remember only those points. Right, Kata Upanishads, from which Veda it belongs to? Samaveda. And what it explains about the real power behind the functions of phenomenal universe and the workings of man. And apart from that, within this specific principle discussion, it asks a main question who the Atman is, and it provides the answer for that within the same discussion. Right. So, and the third Upanishad is Kata Upanishad. Kata Upanishad. Right, Kata Upanishad. Right, so it belongs to Yajurveda. Kata Upanishad belongs to Yajurveda. And one important fact about the Kata Upanishad is it could be identified as most philosophical Upanishad among all. Kata Upanishad could be identified as most philosophical Upanishad among all. Right, so there is a relatable story within this passage that you could go through. I'm not going to discuss, it's just a story. Right, so relatable story about the Kata Upanishad, about two individuals or two spirits, Yama and Nichiketa. Right, so and if we take the Kata Upanishad, it mainly discusses about the philosophical discourses about death and immorality. Philosophical discourses about death and immorality. Right, and also apart from that, Kata Upanishad gives us a very interesting illustration. Body, the chariot. For example, we could say a chariot carrying a person. Right, so the chariot is illustrated as our body, and the person is illustrated as the Atman. Chariot is illustrated as our body, and the person who is carrying by the chariot is illustrated as the Atman. Right, so those are the main discussions within the Kata Upanishad. And apart from that, some passages which are included within the Kata Upanishad are very common to Bhagavad-Gita. Right, so hope you know about, I think, Miss Anupama and Ms. Rahul, you have an idea about the Bhagavad-Gita, one of the chief devotional text in India. Right, so it talks about Dharma. Right, so most of the passages within the Bhagavad-Gita are common to Kata Upanishad. Most of the passages are equal within the Bhagavad-Gita as well as the Kata Upanishad. Right, so that is all about Kata Upanishad. Right, so I have given a big paragraph, but you have to grab only the important parts. Right, so if you take Kata Upanishad, it came from Yajurveda. It belongs to Yajurveda. And another important point within the Kata Upanishad is that it is the most philosophical Upanishad. It could be identified as the most philosophical Upanishad amongst all. And what it discusses about, the philosophical discourses about death and immorality. And it gives us a very interesting illustration where the body as a chariot and the person who carries by the specific chariot is illustrated as the self or Atman. And another important fact is that some passages which are described within the Kata Upanishad are similar to the passages within the Bhagavad-Gita. Right, so those are the important points about the Kata Upanishad. Right, now next one is Krashna Upanishad. Fourth principle is Krashna Upanishad. It belongs to Atharva Veda. Krashna Upanishad belongs to Atharva Veda, and within this Krashna Upanishad, it discusses about 6 questions. Six questions are discussed, and those questions were asked from a sage called Pippalada. Those questions were asked from a sage called Pippalada, and within the Krashna Upanishad, the 6 questions are included, discussed, and the answers to those six questions are explained. Right. So within the Krashna Upanishad, there are 6 questions which were asked from a sage called Pippalada. Those 6 questions are given, and the answers for those 6 questions are explained within the Krashna Upanishad. Right? Right. So the questions are basically about human personality, creation, human creation, and metaphysical principle of a man. Those are the relatable questions which are discussed within the Krashna Upanishad. Human personality, human creation, and metaphysical principle of man. And within the answers, they include several topics such as sensory perceptions, intellect, egoism, conscious self, and etc. The answers to those 6 questions are explained within the Krashna Upanishad. Right? So Krashna Upanishad, it belongs to Atharva Veda. What it discussed about, 6 questions which were asked from a sage called Pippalada are described. Those 6 questions are basically about the human personality, human creation, and metaphysical principle of a man. And the answers to those 6 questions are explained within this dissertation. Those answers includes topics such as sensory perception, intellect, egoism, and conscious self. Right? So that is about the Krashna Upanishad principle, right? So the next principle is the Mundaka Upanishad. Mundaka Upanishad, right? So Mundaka Upanishad belongs to Atharva Veda. Mundaka Upanishad also belongs to Atharva Veda. If we take the term Munduka is the meaning is the shavan, right? So shavan, and this specific Upanishad could be identified as the most poetic Upanishad among all Upanishads, right? It is an important fact where it is the most poetic Upanishad among all the Upanishads, right? So what it talks about, now let's look at what it talks about. The Mundaka Upanishad, it basically talks about the ascetic life of an sannyasi is another name for ascetics, right? So as the way of an ascetic life, or we could say the life of an ascetics, right? So Mundaka Upanishad basically talks about the ascetic life, right? So and apart from that, it further discussed about the differences in between the higher knowledge and lower knowledge. Right, so we discussed about the higher knowledge and lower knowledge earlier. It distinguished the differences. If you take the Mundaka Upanishad, it distinguished the differences in between the higher knowledge and lower knowledge. And they according to the description or the discussion which are included within the Mundaka Upanishad, we could say that they believed that the ascetics who gave up their everything could obtain the highest knowledge. They believed that the ascetics or sannyasis who renounced or gave up their everything could obtain, according to the descriptions and their beliefs within the Mundaka Upanishads. They believed that ascetics who gave up their everything, renounced their everything, could achieve the highest knowledge, right? So that is what Mundaka Upanishad came from Atharva Veda. If you take the Mundaka, the term means shaven, right? Shavan, right? So they basically talks about the life of an ascetic, life of an ascetic, and apart from that, it further discusses about the differences. They distinguish the differences between the higher knowledge as well as the lower knowledge, and also they believe that the ascetics or sannyasis who renounce the everything could achieve the higher knowledge, who gave up the everything could achieve the higher knowledge. That is the Mundaka Upanishad. Right. The next principle is Mandukya Upanishad. Next principle is Mandukya Upanishads. Right. So Mandukya Upanishad is uh, bit important, and there are a few points to note within the Mandukya Upanishad. Right. So Mandukya Upanishad is also belongs to Atharva Veda, and it contains 12 verses. He said that it contains 12 verses, and why the Mandukya, this name was given, the sage, because the sage teacher or sage guru was a person called Mandukya, right? So that is why this specific name is given for this principle. The sage teacher was a person called Mandukya, right? So within the Mandukya Upanishad, we could identify 4 status of human minds. It talks about 4 status of human mind. 4 status of human minds, right? So the states are walking, dreaming, profound sleep. Walking, dreaming, profound sleep, and Turiya. Turiya is the most real one, right? So they talk about these 4 states of human minds, right? So the first, fourth. So we will discuss a bit in detail about these 4 states. So 4 stages, right? The first one is state of walking. State of walking, right? So they believe that it is interpreted as when a person is walking, he is outwardly aware. When a person is walking, he is outwardly aware, right? So the second fourth is the state of dreaming. Second part is the state of dreaming, and it indicates that when person is dreaming, he or she is inwardly aware, right? So the third fourth is the profound sleep. Then during this stage, during this stage, a person is enjoying bliss and in a kind of state of thoughtfulness and cognition, right? So those are the first 3 states, right? The first part is state of walking. Second, fourth is the state of dreaming. Third, fourth is the profound sleep, right? So, and the fourth part, the final part is the state of it's kind of the real state, or the state of which should be discerned, right? So it is identified as the turiya or real state, right? So it talks about the tranquility, benignity, and without comparison, right? That is the fourth state, right? So, and the I think I sent you a symbol called Om today, a image and a very small description, right? So the principle, the specific three basically the first 3 states are related with this specific sound Om, right? They are trying to interrelate the sound or symbol Om with the these states, and Om we could spell it as AUM, right? OAUM, and they are trying to interrelate those states of mind with this symbol, with this sound, specifically with this sound, right? So we are not going to learn very deeply about that rather you could just have an idea about the that the within the Mandukya Upanishad, four states are given, right? So the what are those four states? Can you tell me what are those four states?
What?
The state of walking,
Waking, dreaming, profound sleep, and
yes,
Turiya.
yes. So those four states are interrelated to the symbol or sound called Om, right? So Om, right? So it is AUM, right? First, they are interrelated to those symbol or basically to the sound, right? So I send you an image. Within that image, those states are, I think, have marked. If you want to know more information, you could Google it. Actually, I took that symbol from Google, right? So it is believed that that specific, I don't know, whenever you want to have positive vibes, whenever we want to listen to very positive music or whatever, that Om sound is interpreted through anything, it believed that the Om sound would give positive vibes to mind, right? So that is why this Mandukya Upanishad wants to interrelate the Om sound with those states of the or stages of the mind, right? So that is about the Mandukya Upanishad, and the most important part about the Mandukya Upanishad is that it is believed that Mandukya Upanishad alone is enough to get the liberation, right? Mandukya Upanishad alone is enough to lead one to liberation, right? So that is why it is more important, right? So the seventh one we are going to discuss is Taittiriya Upanishad. Taittiriya Upanishad, right? So it belongs to the Yajurveda. It belongs to the Yajurveda, and it talks about the ethical rules and proper dharma to pupils. Actually, the teacher is identified as guru within the within specifically this age, right? Teacher is identified as guru, and according to Taittiriya Upanishad, it is believed that teacher or guru describe the ethical rules and proper dharma to pupils. Ethical rules and proper dharma to pupils, right? So within the Taittiriya Upanishad, we could identify five main sheets: food, breath, mind, intellect, and bliss. Food, breath, mind, intellect, and breath. Right. So those are the basic or main important points within the Taittiriya Upanishad. It belongs to Yajurveda, and within this Taittiriya Upanishad, there is a teacher, and there are students or pupils, and teacher describes about the ethical rules and proper dharma to its students, and it is famous for five sheets, namely food, breath, mind, intellect, and bliss, right? So so far we discussed about seven Upanishad principles, right? So as it is a bit confusing, I'm not planning to discuss all the 13 Upanishad principles. Rather, I'm going to stop by these seven Upanishads, and the rest of the six Upanishads I'm planning to discuss in our next lecture. Okay, right? So let's, before we are winding up, we'll go through the seven principles which were discussed so far quickly, right? So first one is Isha Upanishad. It belongs to Yajurveda. So it basically discusses about the path of knowledge and path of action. Apart from that, within that specific discussion or dissertation, two parts we could identify. Within the former parts, it discusses about the Atman in its transcendent form, and within the latter part, it discusses about the immanent form, right? Apart from that, it discusses about the paradoxical nature of the self, right? And at the end of this specific Isha Upanishad, it has a plea to God of light, Agni. We could say it as Agni, God of fire, or Surya, and they plea that specific God for them to help to understand parts of proper knowledge and action, because proper knowledge and action is the main points that they talk within the Isha Upanishad, right? Right. The second principle that we discuss today is the Kata Upanishad. It belongs to Samaveda. It belongs to Samaveda. If we take the term Kata means the by whom, right? So it talks about the real power behind the functions of the phenomenal universe and workings of a man, right? So apart from that, it asks a question what Atman is, and within the same description or within the same dissertation, it gives the answers for that question, which is the what Atman is, right? The third Upanishad principle is the Kata Upanishad. It comes from which Veda?
Yajurveda.
Yajurveda, yes. And it talks about philosophy. It is a kind of philosophical discourse about death and immortality. And it gives a very interesting illustration where a chariot carries a person. Likewise, it illustrates the chariot to the body, and the person who is carried by a chariot to the self or Atman, right? So the important point is that the Kata Upanishad is the most philosophical Upanishad among all, and the another important fact that we could identify is some passages within the Kata Upanishad are similar to the great Indian book called Bhagavad-Gita, right? So the fourth Upanishad that we discussed is Krashna Upanishad, right? So it belongs to Atharva Veda. Within this specific discourse, 6 questions were asked from a sage called Pippalada, and the questions and basically are about the human personality, human creation, and the metaphysical principles of a man. And the answers are given within the same discussion. The answers basically include answers are about the sensory perception, intellect, egoism, and etc. Right. So the fifth principle that we discussed is the Mundaka Upanishad. It also belongs to Atharva Veda, and it talks about the ascetic or sannyasi's life, and it apart from that, they distinguish the differences between the higher knowledge and lower knowledge, and they believe that sannyasis or sages or ascetics who renounced everything could obtain the highest knowledge. Whoever gave up everything could achieve or obtain the higher knowledge. So if you take the important points, Mundaka means, if you take the means, Shavan, and the Mundaka Upanishad is the most poetic Upanishad among all the Upanishads, right? So the sixth one we discussed is Mandukya Upanishad, right? So it also came from Atharva Veda. It has some important points to trace, where it gives 4 states of mind: state of walking, state of dreaming, profound sleep, and real state. And real state is the final one which needs to discern, right? So it talks about the tranquility, benignity without comparison, right? So and they talks further the interrelation with the states with the Om sound, right? So the And it is said that another important point with the Mandukya Upanishad is that it is believed that having or understanding Mandukya Upanishad alone is enough to get liberation, right? So the why the name Mandukya was given, because the sage teacher was Mandukya. And another point that there are 12 verses within the Mandukya Upanishad, and apart from that there are two teacher, there is a specific teacher and a student who extensively commented within this Upanishad. Teacher is Gaudapada and a student called Shankara, right? That is not much important, right? So the other rest of the other facts are important, right? So the final Upanishadic principle that we discussed today was Taittiriya Upanishad, and it comes from Yajurveda, right? So it describes about a guru or describe about how the way in which a guru or teacher describes about the ethical rules and proper dharma to its students, right? So it discusses about 5 sheets: food, breath, mind, intellect, and bliss, right? So those are the 7 Upanishad principles that we discussed today. So I will send you a photo of the summary which I prepared, right? So you could re-prepare by adding whatever you want, right? So I'm not going to give you any questions tonight. Once I finish the entire lecture note, as we have 6 more to go, once we finish that all, I'm planning to give you a question, right? So the main point why I wanted to discuss only 7 or the actually half, because it is really confusing for you to grab everything and you understand and realize, right? So go through the what we discussed so far, and let's see the other 6 principles within our next class, right? So I will send you the summary which I prepared tonight or most probably by tomorrow, right? So that is it for today. We have around 10 minutes, right? So I think it's okay to wind up, right? So go through the lecture note, and once I send you the summary and go through it, I think it will be really easy for you to understand rather than going through these passages, right? Right. So that is all
Okay.
for today. Okay. Then
Okay.
let's wind up tonight. Thank you for joining with me.
Thank you very
Stay
much.
safe.
Thank you very
Thank you
much.
very much. Thank you
Good
very
night.
much. Stay safe. Good night. Good night.